Ever look at families who seem to effortlessly build wealth? Not just for themselves, but like across generations?
That is fascinating.
Or maybe you're in your 20s or 30s right now just trying to figure out how to even start building a financial future, one that goes way beyond just, your own retirement.
It's a huge question, definitely. And it can feel, well, incredibly complex when you start digging in. Like, what are the actual steps?
Mm.
How does saving personally turn into some kind of generational legacy?
That's exactly what we wanted to understand. So for this deep dive, we went through quite a bit of material conversations from online communities talking about family wealth strategies,
Mhm.
practical guides aimed at young adults just starting out, and insights from, seasoned financial experts.
Yeah, our goal today is really
Mhm.
to try and cut through some of that noise.
Yeah.
We've pulled out what seem to be the core strategies, some surprising facts maybe, and the essential steps. We want to give you a clear picture of building your own financial strength early on, and then explore those perhaps less discussed aspects of creating and transferring wealth, long-term, multi-generationally.
So we'll journey through the crucial financial steps in your 20s and 30s, dive into the essentials of managing money smartly portfolios, taxes, that sort of thing, and then tackle that really powerful idea of building a lasting legacy.
All right, sounds good. Let's unpack this journey.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning, those foundational years, your 20s. If you're there now or you remember being there, what's the single biggest advantage you have? What did the sources really point to?
It really comes down to something incredibly simple, but immensely powerful. Time, just the sheer amount of time your money has to grow.
Ah, yes. The magic trick, compound interest. It's like your money starts earning money and then that money earns money. That whole snowball effect.
And the numbers we saw illustrating this were just, well, mind-boggling. There was one example comparing someone who starts investing just $200 a month at age 24 versus waiting until 34. By age 64, that 10-year head start, investing the exact same amount each month, could mean a difference of over $1 million in retirement savings.
Wow. $1 million.
$1 million. Just for starting $200 a month sooner. It really shows you.
That statistic just perfectly highlights the power of consistency and time, even if the amounts feel small at first. So, okay, given that huge advantage of time, what were the absolute must-do steps the sources emphasized for young adults, the non-negotiables?
They really hammered home the fundamentals. First off, getting a handle on where your money is actually going.
The budget.
Yes, creating, and this is key, regularly reviewing a budget. It's not about deprivation. It's more about giving every dollar a purpose, a job. But the crucial part isn't just making one.
It's using it.
Exactly. It's using it and adjusting it as life changes, which it inevitably does.
Right. Life doesn't stand still, so your budget shouldn't either. Okay, what's next?
Having a clear picture of what you're saving for. Setting financial goals, both short-term things, maybe like saving for a trip or a car.
Down payment on a house, maybe.
Yeah, or long-term, like that down payment or retirement itself. Goals give you direction and, honestly, motivation.
Makes sense. Keep your eye on the prize.
Absolutely. And then protecting those goals with a solid emergency fund. Most sources seem to suggest aiming for about 3-6 months of essential living expenses.
Okay.
Tucked away somewhere safe and easy to access. This is your shield against the unexpected, job loss, surprise medical bills, car breakdowns. It stops you from having to raid your long-term investments when life throws a curveball.
Which brings us to debt, right? Especially that high interest kind. Credit cards, maybe some student loans. Tackling these early seemed critical in what we looked at.
Oh, definitely. Think of it like trying to run a marathon with, weights chained to your ankles. High-interest debt just drains your resources. It makes building wealth exponentially harder.
Yeah.
So focusing on paying that off, whether you use the debt avalanche method or the snowball method, it has to be a priority. You want to redirect that money towards building assets, not just feeding the interest monster.
Okay, so fundamentals in place. Budget, goals, emergency fund, attack the bad debt. What else came up for the 20s?
Another crucial investment, especially when you're young. Investing in yourself.
Your skills.
Your skills, your earning potential, your human capital, as they sometimes call it. It's arguably your biggest asset early on.
Yeah.
Continuously learning, getting new skills, certifications. This directly impacts how much you can earn over your whole career.
That's an investment with potentially massive returns, for sure.
Huge returns. And while you're boosting that primary income, maybe look into other streams. A side hustle, some freelancing, perhaps even early forms of passive income. It adds resilience and can really accelerate your savings.
Good point. More income streams mean more options.
And given that compounding magic we talked about, starting to save for retirement immediately was basically presented as non-negotiable.
Even if it's small amounts.
Even small amounts. Get started with a 401k or an IRA. And if your employer offers a match on your retirement contributions, that came up again and again as free money. Yet you can't afford to leave that on the table. Contribute at least enough to get the full match.
Couldn't agree more on the free money part. Okay, and finally, there was a principle that seemed to cut across all stages, but vital to start early.
Living below your means. It's easy, right, to fall into that trap of lifestyle inflation as your income goes up.
Yeah, the temptation is real.
The sources really cautioned against spending everything you earn. The goal isn't to look rich in your 20s or 30s. It's to actually become financially secure, wealthy over time. And that often means delaying gratification, making conscious choices about spending.
Like maybe not rushing into the fanciest car or the biggest house just because you technically can't afford the payment now.
Exactly. Building that solid foundation first.
Okay, so that feels like a really solid bedrock for your 20s. Budget, goals, emergency fund, debt payoff, invest in yourself, start retirement saving early, live below your means. Phew. Now, as you move into your 30s and beyond, life often gets, well, more complicated, doesn't it?
It certainly can. More responsibilities often pop up, maybe family, mortgages, kids.
Right, so saving can feel harder then maybe.
It can feel harder, yeah.
Yeah.
Your 30s might bring increased expenses, but often it's also when you hit your peak earning years. So this phase is really about building on that foundation, gaining momentum, and getting a bit more strategic.
How do you keep that momentum going when it feels like you're juggling more plates?
Well, the sources suggested revisiting and, crucially, revamping your budget. It becomes even more critical now. Your financial picture has likely changed quite a bit since your 20s. Your budget needs to reflect any new costs, maybe childcare or a mortgage, but also potentially higher income. You need to make sure you're still hitting those savings and investment targets.
And retirement savings, time to get serious.
Absolutely serious. You're likely in a higher tax bracket, earning more. This is the time to significantly ramp up those contributions if you can, whether it's your 401k IRA or other options depending on where you live. Increasing your savings rate now makes a huge difference down the line.
And investment strategy. With potentially decades still until retirement, did the sources suggest getting maybe a bit bolder?
Yeah, the term sharper investment moves came up. With that longer time horizon, you generally have more capacity to take on calculated risk, particularly in the stock market for growth potential.
Through things like index funds or ETFs, maybe.
Exactly. Index funds and ETFs were frequently mentioned as efficient, low-cost ways to get broad market exposure. Obviously, the strategy shifts closer to retirement, becoming more conservative, but your 30s and 40s are often seen as prime time for growth-focused investing.
And what about those debts we talked about earlier, if they're still around?
Don't just coast on the minimum payments. Pay them down aggressively. Use bonuses or any surplus income. Making consistent, on-time credit card payments is fundamental, of course, and exploring things like balance transfers to lower interest rates can free up significant cash flow.
Okay. Now, a strategy that seemed like a potentially major wealth builder for some in this phase was starting a business.
Yes, that came up quite a bit. Leveraging years of professional experience and knowledge to build your own company. It can lead to significant wealth creation. It involves risk, naturally.
Of course.
But the potential for building equity, creating multiple income streams, and even certain tax advantages were highlighted as major potential drivers.
And kind of tied into that, maybe the importance of networking, building professional relationships.
Definitely. The sources mentioned this not just for, say, climbing the corporate ladder, but also for discovering new opportunities, maybe finding partners or investors if you go the business route, and just staying motivated by connecting with other ambitious people.
Keeps you sharp.
Yeah. Oh, and that emergency fund we talked about, as your responsibilities grow, maybe with a mortgage or kids, many sources recommended boosting it further. Aiming for closer to a year's worth of essential expenses as you approach your 40s. A bigger cushion. A bigger cushion provides vital liquidity during major unforeseen events, like maybe a longer period of job loss. It protects your core long-term investments from being rated prematurely.
Okay, so that covers the momentum phase. What about later stages, say your 40s and 50s? What are the key focuses then?
Well, for many people, their 40s are when they might look at their retirement savings and realize, uh-oh, I might be behind. So it can become a period of potentially playing catch up and really optimizing things.
So knowing your investments inside and out becomes even more critical.
Absolutely. Understanding your portfolio, how it's allocated. If you haven't before, this might be the time to work with a financial advisor to make sure your investments align with your updated timeline and risk tolerance. And automating your contributions, just setting it and forgetting it, is a simple but incredibly effective tactic for consistency.
Right, takes the emotion out of it.
Exactly. And a critical point that came up repeatedly. Avoid borrowing from your retirement accounts. It can be really tempting if cash gets tight, but the penalties, the taxes, and especially the lost growth, it's significant damage to your future savings. It really should be a last resort, if considered at all.
Makes sense. Don't sabotage your future self. What about other big liabilities, like a mortgage?
Focusing on paying down the mortgage was definitely highlighted. Getting rid of that major debt, maybe by refinancing to a 15-year mortgage if possible, or just making extra principal payments, frees up enormous cash flow as you get closer to retirement.
Big psychological win, too, I imagine.
Huge. And for those 50 and over, there's a specific advantage the IRS offers. Catch-up contributions.
Ah, yeah, saving extra for retirement.
Right. You're allowed to contribute extra above the standard limits. Currently, that's an additional $1,000 per year into a Roth IRA. And for 401ks, it's an extra $7,500, bringing the total possible contribution up to $30,000 annually for those 50 plus.
That extra saving power could really make a difference in those final working years.
It really can. And other things might shift too. As kids leave home, maybe downsizing your living situation becomes an option, freeing up more capital for saving or investing.
Less house, more savings.
Potentially. And crucially, maintaining robust health insurance coverage was mentioned repeatedly. Unexpected medical costs can absolutely devastate even well-laid financial plans, especially later in life. So protecting your health also directly protects your wealth.
Very important point. And one last thing for this stage, Social Security timing.
Yeah, something to really start researching in your late 50s and early 60s. Understanding how claiming benefits early, say at 62 versus waiting until maybe 70, impacts your monthly payout.
And your spouse's benefits, too, potentially.
Exactly. It's a complex decision, but a vital piece of retirement income planning. It can significantly affect your cash flow for potentially decades.
Okay, so we've covered building wealth through the different stages of life. Now let's dig into the mechanics of managing that growing wealth specifically. Portfolios and taxes. How do we handle that efficiently?
Right. Portfolio management is basically your strategy for selecting and overseeing your investments. The goal is to meet your financial objectives while managing the amount of risk you're comfortable with.
And your portfolio is just the collection of all your investments.
Exactly. Your stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, maybe real estate, whatever you hold. Building that collection involves a few key decisions.
Okay, like what?
First, really clarifying your investment goals and your time horizon. Are you saving for retirement in 30 years or maybe a down payment in 5? That massively dictates how aggressive or conservative you can afford to be.
And understanding yourself, your own tolerance for risk.
Critical. Are you okay watching the market swing up and down, hoping for higher long-term returns? Or do you prefer more stability, even if it means potentially lower growth? This helps determine your asset allocation, how you divide your money between different types of investments, like stocks and bonds.
Got it. Then you actually pick the investments and make sure they're diversified.
Diversification came up as absolutely non-negotiable. It means spreading your money across different companies, different industries, different types of assets, even different countries.
So if one area tanks,
Hopefully, others might hold up or even do well, cushioning the blow. It doesn't eliminate risk entirely, of course, but it reduces your exposure to any single point of failure. And things like index funds and ETFs were highlighted as really efficient, low-cost ways to get that diversification easily.
because they hold lots of different stocks or bonds already.
Exactly. And once you build the portfolio, you can't just forget about it, right? You need to monitor it, maybe rebalance it periodically. Yes, that's important. As different investments perform differently, your original mix, say 60% stocks, 40% bonds, gets thrown off. Rebalancing just means selling a bit of what's done well and buying more of what's lagged to get back to your target allocation and intended risk level.
Okay. So what were some of the best practices for actually managing the portfolio that came out of the sources?
Having a clear plan and sticking to it was big. Doing your research on investments, or if that's not your thing, using simple passive options like those index funds, staying diversified obviously, monitoring and rebalancing,
Mm.
keeping your costs low, watching out for high fees and commissions. They really eat into returns over time.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps most importantly, maintaining a long-term perspective. Trying to avoid emotional reactions to short-term market news or dips. That's often where investors make costly mistakes selling low in a panic or chasing hot stocks too late.
Stay the course. Okay, speaking of keeping more of what you earn, let's talk taxes. Tax-efficient investing. This isn't about anything shady, right? It's about using the existing rules smartly.
Exactly. It's a legal strategy to maximize your after-tax returns. Think of it like optimizing your investment game to minimize the drag that taxes create, keeping more money working for you, compounding, instead of sending it off prematurely.
And understanding the different account types is fundamental here. You've got your regular taxable accounts, like a standard brokerage account.
Right. And in those, you pay taxes on capital gains. That's the profit when you sell an investment for more than you bought it for. And you pay taxes on dividends, which are payments companies make to shareholders.
And the tax rates differ.
Yeah, the capital gains rate depends on how long you held the investment. Less than a year, it's taxed at your ordinary income rate, which is usually higher. Hold it for over a year, and you typically qualify for lower long-term capital gains rates. Dividends are also taxed, either at lower qualified rates or higher ordinary income rates.
Okay, so that's taxable accounts. Then you have the tax-advantaged accounts.
These are the real powerhouses for tax efficiency. They basically fall into two main camps, tax-deferred and tax-exempt.
Tax-deferred first.
Tax-deferred accounts, like your traditional IRAs and traditional 401ks, usually give you a tax break now. Your contributions might be pre-tax, meaning they reduce your current taxable income. And your investments inside the account grow year after year without being taxed annually. You only pay income tax when you take the money out in retirement.
Hopefully when you're in a lower tax bracket.
That's often the idea, yes.
Yeah.
And then you have the tax-exempt kind, the Roth accounts, Roth IRAs, and Roth 401ks.
How do they work?
With Roths, you contribute money after you've already paid taxes on it. So no upfront tax break. But the big payoff comes later. Your investments still grow tax-free, and then if you follow the rules, all your qualified withdrawals in retirement are completely 100% tax-free.
Wow, all that growth comes out clean.
It's incredibly powerful, especially if you think you might be in a similar or even higher tax bracket when you retire.
Okay, so knowing these account types, how do you use them and choose investments strategically to be more tax efficient?
Well, one key strategy that came up is called asset location. It's about putting the right type of investment in the right type of account.
Meaning?
You generally want to put investments that generate a lot of taxable income each year, things like actively managed mutual funds that buy and sell frequently, creating capital gains, or maybe bonds generating regular interest income, or high dividend stocks inside those tax-advantaged accounts, either deferred or Roth.
So they're sheltered from annual taxes.
Exactly. Let them grow or distribute income without creating an immediate tax bill for you each year. Conversely, investments that are already tax efficient or that you plan to hold for a very long time to get long-term capital gains rates might be better suited for your taxable brokerage account.
What about selecting investments that are just inherently more tax-friendly?
Yes, that's another angle. Investments like broad market index funds, or ETFs, tend to be quite tax efficient because they don't trade frequently inside the fund. Tax-managed mutual funds are designed specifically to minimize taxable distributions. Municipal bonds are often exempt from federal income tax, and sometimes state and local too if you buy bonds from your own state.
Treasury bonds too, right?
Right, U.S. Treasury bonds are typically exempt from state and local income taxes. So choosing these kinds of investments, especially for your taxable accounts, can help reduce the tax drag.
And finally, timing when you buy or sell.
That matters too. Holding investments in your taxable account for over a year is a big one, just to qualify for those lower long-term capital gains rates when you eventually sell. And another technique mentioned was tax loss harvesting.
Selling losers to offset winners.
Basically, yeah. Intentionally selling investments that have gone down in value to realize a capital loss. You can use that loss to offset capital gains you might have from selling winners, potentially reducing or even eliminating the tax on those gains. You can even use some losses to offset a limited amount of your ordinary income each year. It's a way to turn lemons into, well, tax savings.
Okay, that's a lot on managing the wealth smartly. We've covered building it up personally, managing it, but then there's the shift towards legacy, right? Passing something on.
That's the big shift, isn't it? You know that saying, you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse?
Right. Can't tee with you.
So the conversation naturally turns to, okay, what happens next? What about future generations? Your kids? Your grandkids?
And the sources brought up a really interesting tension here. This idea of money being, well, a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to heirs.
Exactly. That came through strongly. On one hand, look, providing financial resources can absolutely open doors. It can fund education, allow people to start businesses, provide a safety net. It can certainly help future generations realize their potential.
But the flip side,
But the concern that was voiced repeatedly was that if wealth is just handed over without the recipients understanding its value or having earned it or knowing how to manage it, it can actually destroy motivation, stifle ambition. There was a real sense of that potential for, easy times make weak people.
so the idea started to emerge that maybe the most valuable things you can pass on aren't really the money itself.
Yes, absolutely. Sources really emphasized instilling things like a strong work ethic, a resilience when things get tough, a solid moral compass, financial literacy, understanding money, and crucially, the ability to create value to solve problems. The financial wealth is a tool, maybe, but these values are like the instruction manual for using it well.
That quote, often attributed to Warren Buffett, felt really relevant here about leaving children enough money so they feel they could do anything, but not so much that they could do nothing.
That captures the dilemma perfectly, doesn't it? It's a really delicate balance to strike.
So how do people try to strike that balance? What structures or strategies came up for actually transferring wealth?
Well, trusts came up very frequently. They're a common tool to control how and when wealth is distributed. You can set conditions.
Like only giving access to a certain amount each year.
Right. Maybe allowing access to only, say, 3% of the trust principal annually, or perhaps tying distributions to certain milestones like graduating college or holding a job. Some mention conditions like passing drug tests, though others pointed out those can sometimes be gamed.
What about other approaches?
Other variations mentioned included using wealth to directly support future generations while you're still alive. Things like fully funding grandkids' college education through 529 plans, or helping kids with down payments on homes. Sometimes this gets talked about as variations of a die with zero philosophy, using your money for your family's benefit during your lifetime.
Okay. And for larger estates, life insurance seemed important.
Yes, specifically a type called second-to-die life insurance, often held within something called an irrevocable life insurance trust, or ILAIC.
That sounds complicated.
It is a bit complex, but the idea is the insurance pays out after the second spouse passes away. Holding it in the ILAIC can keep the death benefit out of your taxable estate, providing a potentially large tax-free sum to the heirs. This is often used to cover potential estate taxes or just provide liquidity so other assets like a family business or property don't have to be sold quickly.
Any other trust strategies mentioned?
Spousal Lifetime Access Trusts, or SLATs, were also mentioned. They're a way to move assets out of your taxable estate now, potentially saving on estate taxes down the road, while still allowing your spouse to access the funds if needed, which indirectly benefits the whole family.
Wow, okay. This all sounds like you definitely need professional help to navigate.
Oh, absolutely. This is not DIY territory for most people. Navigating wills, different types of trusts, estate tax implications, it really requires a team. You likely need an experienced estate planning attorney, probably an accountant, maybe a tax professional who understands this stuff. Getting qualified help is essential to make sure your wishes are actually carried out efficiently and legally.
Right. Avoid costly mistakes or family fights later.
Precisely. We saw examples mentioned, like the Walton family, noted for reportedly maintaining relatively modest lifestyles despite their huge wealth, and structuring things in ways that aim for resilience, while still allowing family members the freedom to pursue their own passions and careers.
So it echoes that idea, again, providing opportunity and stability, but not necessarily removing the incentive to work or contribute.
Exactly. It ties back to that broader idea that true wealth isn't just about the money. It includes the freedom and ability to pursue meaningful work and make a contribution, not just be a passive recipient.
Okay, so wrapping this section up, what are the absolutely crucial practical steps someone should take if they're starting to think about planning to pass on wealth?
Well, the most fundamental step, honestly, one that every adult over 18 should take, is simply writing a will. It clearly states who gets what and who manages your affairs if something happens to you.
Basic, but essential.
Absolutely essential. Beyond that, especially if your net worth is getting more substantial, say over $1 million or so, establishing a formal estate plan with trusts and potentially other strategies becomes really important.
And organizing everything, that came up too.
Yes, the practical side. Gathering all your important documents, your will, any trust documents, information on bank accounts, investments, insurance policies, maybe even funeral instructions or personal letters you want to leave, and putting them all together in a designated safe place. Sometimes people call it a legacy drawer or a binder.
Makes it easier for loved ones later.
So much easier. Making this information accessible and clear reduces enormous stress and potential confusion or conflict for your family during what's already going to be a really difficult time. Planning ahead is a true gift to them.
Okay, so circling back on everything we've talked about, we've covered quite a journey from laying that financial groundwork when you're young.
Those foundational steps.
Building momentum through your prime earning years, managing your money strategically with investments and taxes, and finally, really thinking about that longer-term vision, about legacy.
Yeah, and the core message across all stages seems pretty consistent, doesn't it? The just unparalleled power of starting early and letting time and compounding do their work.
And the discipline.
The non-negotiable importance of discipline in budgeting, in consistent saving, and critically, in staying out of that destructive high-interest debt.
Smart investing is obviously key, understanding diversification, keeping those costs low, using tax advantages where you can, and planning for the future.
Which includes not just preparing for your own retirement, but really considering the values, not just the money, but the values and resources you want to pass on. Thinking beyond yourself.
And for anyone listening who wants to implement these strategies, especially as things get more complex with higher assets or estate planning,
seeking personalized guidance is really the way to go. Talking to qualified financial advisors, estate planning attorneys, tax professionals, they can help tailor strategies to your specific situation.
building wealth is definitely a long game. It takes discipline, smart decisions, patience. But if, as some sources suggested, the greatest wealth you can leave isn't just the money, but those intangible values, work ethic, resilience, problem-solving skills, how do you actively integrate teaching and modeling those values into your financial plan, into the legacy you're building right now, today?
That's a powerful question to end on. What steps will you listening now take this week? What action can you take, even a small one, to strengthen your financial foundation and start planning for the future, both for yourself and perhaps for those who might come after you?